John Anderson, Director of Meinhard Thailand, tells us about the reasons behind Meinhard Thailand's expansion into Myanmar and the recent project with Yoma Strategic Holdings and Serge Pun and Associations Management as an engineering consultancy to transform the former Ministry of Railways head office and the surrounding 10 acres in Yangon into a $350 million mixed-use residential, commercial, retail, and hospitality project here in TOWARD.
So setting up an office here and setting up your branch here, who are the targeted customers?
Okay, well right now our biggest customer is actually a local Myanmar company. They're actually listed in Singapore. You'll find them under the name Yoma Strategic Holdings, SPA Management. So they're a big real estate developer here. They have been active here for the last 20-25 years, but they're moving into a much bigger league now. Their projects are of a much larger scale, and they recognise that they need help and assistance from overseas consultants like us, expertise to take them to the next level of their development. So they're an excellent client, and we're very, very happy to be working with us and very supportive of us. In fact, really the ones urging us to come and set up our office here. I mean, that's great to have someone saying, look, please come here, Meinhard. We'll help you to set up your business here. So they've been wonderful. And we have some other similar local Myanmar companies that we're hoping to sign some contracts with. We have done some work in the past with the Eden Group as well, another company here. The other sort of work that we typically get as a foreign consultant is with embassies. We've done quite a lot of work with the Australian Embassy here. We hope to do some work with the Canadian Embassy and all the other embassies, perhaps the Thai Embassy in the future, because just as business is moving here, the diplomats are also moving here and need to expand their capacity here on the ground, and thus they need to expand their facilities. And they have been excellent clients for us in the past. But the other reason we're here is many of our clients from Thailand wanting to come into Myanmar, and we will follow them into Myanmar or lead the way, whatever you want to call it. So we do a lot of industrial work, design a lot of factories for big multinational corporates in Thailand, and those people are looking to expand in Myanmar. So naturally, we're their partners engineering wise, and they'll employ us to do their work over here.
Okay. So you mentioned that you have done projects in the past in Myanmar before.
We have, yes.
What was that project? Could you
Okay, so we've not a lot of work, but the FMI Centre, which is quite near this hotel, we were originally involved in that about 20 years ago. The Strand Hotel, which is a famous hotel, which we were involved in the renovation of that several years ago as well. We've done a couple of hotels. I mentioned one in Bagan and one in Napoli for the Eden Group. We're also involved in actually the Presidential Palace in Napoli as well, Naypyidaw, sorry, in Naypyidaw, the capital, some years ago. But we haven't done a lot of work in Myanmar. Very few companies have, because, to be perfectly honest, it's been closed off from the rest of the world, and that's why we're suddenly here with interest, because there is that opportunity now. It's opening up. So in the scheme of our firm, our business, very little work's been done here. Okay. Whereas in Thailand, we've completed more than 1,500 projects. There we've done about 3 or 4 quite small jobs.
Okay. What we normally see the all left out buildings here in Yangon. So what's your thought on this? Do you think that it could be your opportunities, or how do you see this?
Sure. You're probably referring to the buildings that were built about 100 years ago, in the period about 110 to 90 years ago. There was because Yangon was the used to be called Rangoon. It was a British colonial outpost, very much part of the British Empire at the time, and there are some magnificent examples of British colonial buildings that were constructed here. Sadly, many of them are in a very sad state of decay and crumbling away, but many of them still stand up, and they're right now there's an opportunity to renovate those buildings and bring them back to their former glory. But with those older buildings, there's plenty of challenges associated with them. These buildings are really interesting in that many of the parts were actually, the architecture was all, it was basically exported out of London and the UK, and a lot of the materials actually came out in ships and from the UK, so from the United Kingdom. So it's quite amazing to see these very, very grand buildings. I mean, some of them are on a very large scale. We're fortunate to be involved in the conservation and renovation of one of those buildings. It's over 10,000 square metres, a 3-storey red brick laterite stone building. Used to be a administration building for the railway department here, and the plan is to restore it to its former glory and give it a new life, and probably give it a new function as well. Perhaps it will become a hotel, but big challenges with that renovation, and quite an expensive process, I might add as well.
Okay, when you talk about like hotel, and just hotel, or could be anything else too.
It could be. I mean, this particular building, because if you were to see it, it really does lend itself to that particular purpose, because it is such a grand old building, and it would be superb as in that function.
So we could expect to see many old buildings, old colonial buildings, to be turned into hotels or shopping centres here in Yangon.
Well, not necessarily shopping centres, but it depends.
Condominium, I would say.
The thing about the older buildings is that to bring them up to modern standards so that they're safe to occupy requires a lot of engineering strengthening work, a lot of consideration. Yangon is a high seismic zone, so subject to earthquakes. Now, these buildings, unfortunately, were not designed to modern codes and standards. So the other big issue with old buildings is fire risk. So unfortunately, the old buildings didn't have, were constructed from materials, often timber floors, and using materials that are unfortunately susceptible to fire damage, fire stairs, those sort of safeguards that we take for granted in modern buildings, sprinkler systems, simply not provided in those buildings. So a lot of work needs to be done to transform them, to make them safe to occupy. Now, that does require, in some instances, some modification, but it needs to be done in a sensitive way so that the history of the building is still maintained. But the alternative, sadly, is if you don't renovate them in that fashion, then they're not really safe to occupy, and they sadly just will decay further and eventually have to be demolished. So it's a choice you've got to make. Someone has to make that choice. The other thing is that here in this city, a lot of those buildings are privately owned now. So developers, they need to make a business of it. So it needs to be commercially viable for them to, want to renovate. So they need to be able to make a return on their investment. So that's the economics of it.
So your main focus is in Yangon, or your main focus of My Heart Myanmar is in Yangon, or do you plan to probably further expand your focus?
I think, by virtue of the fact that we are focusing on Yangon, but we'd be happy to look at projects anywhere in the country, I guess. But right now we're trying to build up a capability and capacity here in Yangon to service the needs of this city. I think there's plenty for us to do here already, but we're always looking for opportunities wherever they may lie. So it's not going to prevent us from. Just as in Thailand, we have our head office our office in Bangkok, very large office, almost 300 staff there. But we do work all over Thailand, and from that office we do a lot of work in the region. So we export engineering services to as far away to Bangladesh, India, Sri Lanka here. So a lot of the design work will end up being still done in Bangkok, because that's where our large capacity and capability is. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time today.
No problem, sir.
And that wraps up today's edition of Towards 2015. You can watch us again every weekday, same place, same time, same channel. For today, สวัสดีครับ